welcome to this conversation. I'm really proud to be able to talk to these ladies, and I'll tell you why. Because they've done something extremely brave. They've actually set the ball rolling on what could change a lot of things for a lot of people. It could also change how we view marriage culturally as a country. So let me just pedal back a little bit and tell you what's going on. Now, two same-sex couples, one of whom is speaking to me tonight, have moved Delhi High Court seeking a legal right to be married in India. Their argument is very simple. They're saying that because there's no formal acceptance of their relationship under Indian laws, it's a violation of their constitutional right to equality. The petition argues very beautifully that with the reading down of 377 that happened in 2018, and we just finished the second anniversary of that. With that reading down, effectively, people said, okay, you do whatever you want in the privacy of your home. It's no longer a problem for us. It's fine. But there's no formal legal tax-related acknowledgement of that relationship. And what does that mean? And I want to read out a little bit of that petition to you because I thought it was a very beautifully drafted petition. It said, and I quote, "They share their highs, the lows, the joys, and the sorrow of life. They go through the wear and tear of living together. They have the deep, unbreakable bond of two people who have come together in love. The petitioners are like any other couple you may meet, except that they are both women." Now, the petitioners have asked, their petition before the court is that the Special Marriage Act, which in our country is what is used for two people who are from two different religions, that the Special Marriage Act and the Foreign Marriage Act, which is when somebody marries overseas but wants to register it in India, wants it to be recognized in India, both of these acts should be interpreted to also apply to same-sex couples. And they've argued things like opening a joint bank account, for example, buying health insurance, securing address proof, buying a home together, all of these things that perhaps heterosexual couples take for granted, they're not allowed to do because they're same sex. And is that really equality and equal recognition under the eyes of the law as is promised to everybody in this country by our constitution? The lawyers arguing their case, Arundhati Kachu and Menika Guruswamy, argued very beautifully, we would like to be recognized as full human beings. And I think that sentence really meant so much to so many people. And it's perhaps going to be a very long road to get this law changed or to get this law interpreted differently. But this is the first step. And I thought it was really brave of them to file this case and to decide to take on this really long battle. And also very brave of them to agree to speak with me this evening. I want to understand from you why you decided to be petitioners in this case, because it's a lot easier to fly to Paris and get married there.
Yeah, sure. So I'll have a go first and Ankita can add. And I mean, we've both been together now for approximately 8 years. We celebrated our anniversary on the 5th of October. And I think as we've gone along, it's also the day actually the first hearing happened. So that's a coincidence, which we feel is fortuitous. But really, I think as we've gone along, we've realized this is our home. Where we built a home is where our home is. We really enjoy being here. We love it. So it might be great to fly to Paris, but this is where we live. And as we went along and we understood that although we got acceptance between each other and even our families and our friends, for a lot of other things, including the financial structures, the legal bits, our medical bits, all of this was not something that we were really strangers to anybody that we went, and the concept of the couple wasn't there. We have created a home together. But with also COVID coming in and the pandemic coming in, a lot of this got amplified because a lot of us thought about what would happen if one of us is not there. And automatically a couple would otherwise be the next of kin, whether it was for medical decisions. If I'm in the hospital and on the ventilator, I'd like her to take my decisions for me. whether it is our assets, whether it is our finances. And when we realized that this is something that we are not accorded, that was one of the reasons that it became amplified in our sort of relationship. We started talking about it a lot more in the last couple of years. And we thought, we want to solve for this. And we felt like that as Indian citizens, if we wanted to solve for this, we'd like to approach with full faith in our judiciary. We'd like to approach the courts and request for the rights to be fully human, like we said. And I think we felt hopeful that even as ordinary citizens of the country, we could approach the courts and the process. And in many ways, we are really optimistic about this. And we feel that just the fact that we're being heard and duly considered is in itself giving us a lot of hope and faith. And that's why we're sitting here.
That's amazing. Did you have a lot of people? And I remember, I've done a couple of shows in the past about same-sex marriage and why it's important. And invariably, the question that would pop up is, but can't you guys just live together quietly? Isn't that enough? What is the need to, ruffle more feathers because we've come this far? Did you get that a lot? Did a lot of people ask you that?
Yes, I think for sure. I think that's a response. And many times it's come out of a position of concern, Faye, people are, you're happily together, you have a life, you've built a life for yourself. So, isn't that enough? And to be honest, for a long while, we used to think it was enough. But like Kavita said, it's the automatic structure that just falls in place in a heterosexual marriage that is legally recognized by the law. We just became more and more aware of the absence of that in our relationship. And that's really why we chose to fight this and to take this long road rather than just settle for the happy, convenient life we have. So I think it's also about choice and possibility. So in my mind, it's a lot about whatever is enough in life. Is it enough? Is a good enough statement. But is something else possible? Do we have the right to be the full potential that we can be as a couple? I think that is what I'm really sort of feeling a lot more in the last few years. It's often difficult for someone to understand when we start explaining it, because I think there is a lot of unawareness of what's the difference between an automatic privilege that a couple gets. So the difference between a couple and a married couple with two women in the couple, or two, sort of same-sex couple. I think people are not acutely aware of what the difference is. It's like saying, sorry to use an example, but it's like saying, Faye, you can't use YouTube, you can use every other platform. For what reason? And but Insta to hai na, kya hua agar YouTube nahi? Do something else. Why not? So it's like saying, but why? Why would I not be able to use YouTube? Is it because of my same-sex orientation? And does that not sit in a place where I'm not being able to do something that somebody else is being able to do? I don't have the choice any longer. And I think it's about that. And
I think that also, if I were to, sort of identify, I remember feeling this, and I hadn't realized, once my husband and I did get married, we just found that society's sort of acceptance of the relationship is drastically different. And by that I mean when you when you decide to rent a home, the building treats you differently, the landlord treats you differently, your neighbors treat you differently, your aunts and uncles treat you differently, you are expected to go to events together. There's an acknowledgement that there is this person in your life and this person is important. It becomes important to family, becomes important to colleagues, in workspace, financial decisions, all of these things, right? Is that the acknowledgement that you're looking for?
So I would say that's part of the acknowledgement we're looking for. I think the acceptance by the social fabric around us is definitely the automaticity of it. I think it's not even, it's the fact that, do I need to keep fighting for it? It's from a small thing like, if we both live in the same apartment and only the tenant or the owner of the apartment is going to get a swimming pool pass made for the club or to the library. Now it's the guard who asks me, aap kaun ho? If this person is the owner, how are you related? Is she your daughter? Is she your sister? Is she your tenant? And to be able to need to explain at each one of these 1,000 points, because it's not automatic. It's not the two of you are together, therefore it's okay. It's to explain to so many interfaces what comes automatically to a couple that's recognized as a married couple. And you can't even begin to, it's become part of the fabric for us that we will have to do this. And the possibility that it need not be done, our time need not be spent doing this. If we are working professionals, we'd rather be doing all of that than spending time saying, I've got to make 10 trips to the bank to make sure that we can, have a bank account. Can I make 20 trips to actually see whether she can be my nominee in each of the little things? So it's often something that people don't know. And it's so part of it is the legal financial fabric as well. This is how it's constructed. The legally recognized marriage couple gets a whole bundle of rights, gets the protection, gets the recognition. But also in social fabrics, and I'll tell you a small anecdote where, people in the team, when they get married, when they're inviting somebody who's known to be a couple or who is bringing their spouse, you get a single card and say, Dr. So-and-so and, spouse. And our poor team members often have not known what to do. So from the point of view of getting two different cards saying Kavita alag se, Ankita alag se, to Dr. K +1, to family because they don't know, and sometimes it's their parents who are writing the card or a relative who's writing it down and they don't know what to say. And some of them I'm sure have even figured, what do I tell my parents? They come in a group, it's okay, but can I say this is my employer and she's got this as a +1? So it's sometimes such little things, but sometimes it becomes such a way of life for the two of us. And we felt that I think the other part that really, one of the reasons that both of us have decided that we need to do this is that we work in a mental health field and we work mostly with children and adolescents. And we see that the possibility of having a sanctioned relationship is something that at least I didn't have when I grew up. We had no role models. I grew up without any literature, no superheroes talking about this, no story or fiction, no Enid Blyton talks about it. So what lets you find your inner authentic voice? What lets you know what's real? What lets you know that there's a possibility, that what you're feeling is okay? And I think if we don't have that, I see a lot of our young people really conflicted and adversely impacted in their own self-esteem, in their own mental health.
Yes. And I'm going to come to that in a minute, but you did mention parents. And if it's okay for me to ask you a slightly personal question, I want to understand, what it was like for you, for your parents, for example, when you guys came out. Did they struggle with it? Did it take them time to come around? Not just with the fact that you've come out to them, but also the fact that you're in a relationship, because being in a relationship is largely about families also coming on board. And your petition said that you are caring for your parents as well. Would you mind talking about that?
No, not at all. I think the day I told my parents really stands out for me. I think Kavita and I fell in love and we'd been together for a few months. And I was, my parents don't live in this city, they live in another city. And I was like, I have to do this in person. And I remember that, it just so happened that we had moved in together. And the day I moved in, I told Kavita, you know what, I cannot live with the fact that my parents don't know I've taken such a big step. I need to tell them today. And
I was like, no, you can't do this. You can't tell them on the phone.
Yeah.
We'll drive down tomorrow morning. We'll sit with them. We'll talk to them and all of that.
And I just said, you know what? I just need to do this. It was like, it's such a big part of my life. How can they not know? And I remember I was sitting in this room and I just shut the door and I told them on the phone and I said, I want both of you to be on speaker because I can't repeat this. And I don't even remember. I was crying, fumbling through it. And just because I was crying, I remember my mom started crying. And in the midst of that, I think the only thing they said was, can we just ask you, is this what makes you happy? And I said, yes, more than anything. And they just said, well, then nothing else matters. And I mean, I cannot tell you what that meant to me. I hadn't expected it, but it was in that moment, like, it was really like my parents just seeing me as fully human. And yes, not to say after that, they've not had their struggles of finding the vocabulary to speak to their friends or relatives. So I think the emotional acceptance, the experiential acceptance of us as a couple, like Kavita, is a very important part of my family, which includes my parents, aunts, uncles. But do they have the vocabulary of how to introduce her at a wedding or how to introduce her as to their friends? No. So I think those two processes are sometimes a bit different.
Kavita, and this happens because, and I've had some conversations with parents of, members of the LGBTQI community, and the challenge is really talking to the extended family. And when the extended family is asking interested questions like, "Shadi kyun nahi kar rahi hai? Kya ho raha hai? Tum matlab, do you not want to have grandchildren?" Answering those questions becomes challenging, right, for parents?
Yes. I think as we go along, we realize that for us also, finding the language has been in itself a journey. And I really wonder, even my father, now my mother has passed now a few years ago, but my father is in his late 80s. And finding the vocabulary to speak to him and make our experience relatable to him is very different from speaking to our nieces and nephews, who are 18 and who are so quick on the take and say, oh, of course, we knew. So I remember my 14 or 15-year-old niece at that point of time, when I, for the first time, told her, I said, this is who Ankita is to me. She said, of course I know. What are you saying? I already knew about it. So it's like when I spoke to their parents and I said, listen, you guys, I think it's time I spoke to the kid and this and that. And they said, yeah, what are you going to say? And the children know. And they are far more accepting. But I think to find the difference between what is acceptance of the two of us living together and the acceptance even for my parents to be able to say to, let's say, their neighbors.
Yes.
They can say we are friends.
Which is
what usually is the vocabulary they use. They live together for a long time. There were other people who would explain us as, they're colleagues. So one of them doesn't have a house, one of them has a house, so they sort of live together, which is, well, this is how they looked at it. And it's over a period of time that we've tried to sort of increase their awareness and vocabulary and help them say it without feeling odd within. And I think we're very fortunate in that sense that we have this little community of ours that really is able to love us back and support us and where we feel accepted. So, yeah.
So we're getting a lot of wonderful messages from our audience. Arun says, Ankita and Kavita, thank you for your courage. This is how social movement begins. This will give little courage to many more people to publicly be true to themselves. And that I think there are hundreds of comments. I'm just reading out a few. Abhishek Maurya, thank you as well. And to ask you that, Ankita, that, filing this case is also in some way coming out publicly to the general public, not just your circle of friends and family who are keeping you and keeping your identity safe. You're putting yourself out there. I want to acknowledge the bravery it takes to do that, the strength it takes to do that. But is that something that you sort of worried about a little bit, that do we really want to do this? Because now uncle who lives at the end of your society colony also knows. And you may not really, he might not be the most understanding uncle of all.
I mean, we did think about it.
Quite a lot.
We did have our reservations. But I think there was also this clarity that both of us, I think, implicitly just shared, that, we've spent and continue to spend 8 years building the life we have. and it's a beautiful life. We are very thankful for it. But one is, of course, would we want that life to be legally recognized within the legal social fabric of society? That was one. And I think the other thing, Faye, is that we also felt that, a sense of responsibility as a couple with certain privileges to do this. I mean, and to be, because we felt we could, and we thought if we can do this and we feel able to do this, then it would be a shame to not do it, not just for ourselves. So, I mean, to be very honest, this is something that Kavita and I talk about a lot, because a lot of people have already started asking us, ki, tumhari shaadi mein ye hoga and all of that. And to be very honest with you, for us, every step of this journey is a milestone. Like, even the messages that you're reading out to us today, the fact that this resonance is being created, the fact that this relatability is being created, that this can be a possible future for all of us. I think for us, that's really the biggest factor that went into this decision.
I mean, I wish I had a Kavita and Ankita to explain to my mother when she was alive. To say, आप ये video interview देखो, जो ये लोग कह रहे हैं ना, हमें वैसा लगता है. I wish I had something like that.
Yes.
I mean, without understanding, I mean, she's not, God bless her, but she just could not understand our relationship.
And I think this is beautiful for a second reason, because while I've conducted many conversations with the LGBTQI community in the last four odd years, representatives or representation of women within that community is very difficult to come by. And as a result, there isn't enough conversation about it. And as a result, and you said very beautifully that your parents asked, is this what makes you happy? And they said, okay, we're on board. But we know that there are hundreds of thousands of women across the country for whom parents think this is either a phase and they'll get out of it, or they think that, they just simply, it's even more difficult for the women to bring their families on board, because they think we'll just get you married and, you'll grow out of it in some way. This normally doesn't happen to the men. And for women right now who are in smaller cities, who get to look at you as role models, this is going to make a massive, massive difference. And we had a question pop up from someone who said, when you say technically, legally same sex, are you leaving out transgender? Are you leaving out, other members of the community? Or will this include everyone?
No, the petition includes everyone. So we do not see it as just the same sex. I think that's some of the headlines that the media has picked up. But the petition actually says, regardless of sexual orientation and regardless of gender identity. So it encompasses the entire spectrum of humanness. It's not about sexual orientation. It's about two individuals who love each other to have the right of the choice of marrying each other. And I think that's really what we believe in, truly believe in.
And, again, picking up from what we learned in the 377 judgment as well, Ankita, this is not, at that point, there was this obsession about, is this about sex? But this is not about sex. This is about love, right? And I just want you to explain to us how important it is for people to realize that we're talking about love. We're not talking about sex.
I think, it's so easy for the concept of sex and sexuality to be looked at in such a limited way. In fact, mujhe lagta hai ki that's one of the reasons why this whole narrative of, do whatever, behind closed doors, but don't make it part of the social fabric comes from. And to us, any relationship is so much about, being there for each other, learning to grow together. And for us in the last 8 years, it has not even been limited to just the two of us. It has included being a part of each other's family, each other's community, each other's interests. And to me, that is love. And if that doesn't deserve recognition for each and every person, and to be able to choose, irrespective of gender, irrespective of sexual orientation, who they want to spend who they want to have that sort of relationship with, then I don't know, what else.
I grew up on Bollywood, Faye. And Bollywood says, if you can find your love, किसी ना किसी दिन कोई ना कोई है जो मिलेगा. Now, as you grow up, if you grow up with the experiences that I had, and you come to realize कि शायद नहीं है कोई, and then you suddenly find your love. Gender doesn't matter. Mil gaya. Now I have the good fortune of finding the love, and I am able to create a home. We are able to create a relationship, a bond. Our families, we care for each other's families. Ankita cares for mine, I care for hers. We do things together. I mean, to us, this is the concept. This is what we want to build together. So we think this is what it is about. And to have the choice to do that, and to be able to, these are aspirations. You will be able to find someone that you truly love with and want to spend the rest of your life with. I think that's pretty big. And I mean,
I don't think there's any heterosexual marriage that can claim to be more than what you have just described. I mean, this is what it is, and this is what I think all relationships strive to be. You are both mental health professionals, and I know that played a large part as well. Ankita, you and I talked about the young people that you meet, that you talk to in your line of work, and we know that research shows us that there is a higher instance of self-harm, depression, anxiety among members of the LGBTQI community, simply because they don't have this recognition. They don't have role models. They don't have anyone talking to them about the fact that it's going to be okay. You can live a perfectly adjusted life as a fully functioning member of society. This doesn't mean that your life is over. Give us some instances of why you believe that this is important to also be a role model at this point.
I think, when you think of young people, what do young people spend most of their time thinking about? It's about the future, right? It's about possibilities. It's about who I can be, what I can do, where I can live. Youth is a lot about that, right? Dreams, possibilities. And I think just the fact that for us, one of the biggest things that we hold ourselves accountable for is that every young person, for them to be able to imagine, that I can live as a full human and have the dreams that I want to have, and they can be recognized and realized, and I don't have to limit them. I think that's really, for us, I think the biggest thing, a lot of what you imagine about the future for yourself, it's based on a full acceptance of who you are as a person, right? And if you have to cut that off right at the beginning, what dreams would you be left with? And I think for young people, that's really our biggest hope in their lives. And we feel quite passionate about that.
So, yeah, often when I'm sitting across someone who's young and who's, in a sense, very tentatively and with a lot of trepidation, confiding, I feel, why is it that this natural diversity is not okay to talk about? Why is it that there are no emotionally safe spaces where somebody has to, where the coming out process is such a big deal, and you have to keep coming out to people and more people and extended family and friends, and then the workplace, and then the guard whom you're standing in line with and doesn't understand whether you're male or female, if you're so it's so many things that a young person has to A, interface with, but B, to be cautious about. And imagine the youth spending time doing this rather than what they should be doing. And to me, that's again something that impacts the nations and the young mental health of this country. Because we have this beautiful set of very intelligent, I truly believe that this generation of young people is the most intelligent that India has ever seen. They're smarter than any of us. And I mean, I usually say that I'm also pretty young, but you know, my hair belies that. So I'm not going to lie today because this is, you know, live and I'm on camera. But I truly believe that they don't need to fight this fight at every interface. There is so much they're able to do. There's so much they're built for. There's so much possibility. And
Yes.
if both of us consider ourselves Indian citizens and we have a voice today, we are ordinary citizens with a voice, then I think we should use it and and say what we truly believe is considers, you know, it needs to be considered and said.
Well, I just want to read out more, comments to you. Harshita Kaushal says this interview should be transcribed and circulated because the articulation is absolutely stunning. We have Humpy Mukherjee who's just given us a rainbow of hearts, but this one is beautiful. Arjita Sen says my sister is transitioning right now, and he is facing the same issues of marriage, finance, insurance, etc. Thank you for fighting this battle. And I mean, there are hundreds of messages. Nidhi Kapoor says, you guys are so brave putting yourself out there like this. We all love you and are super proud of you for the role, for being role models for all of us. And there are many, many comments like this. Divya Mohanan, if our aspiration is to find true love, then why the decision to get married? While I sincerely hope that you find success in your petition, a failure shouldn't dishearten you. I do know that, and I said this in the beginning, this is possibly going to be a very long road, and there might be, might be failures on this route before, and I hope you do find success. Are you prepared for that, really long road?
Life's a long road, so till we are there, it's okay to journey. And I mean, that's how we've lived our life till now. I don't think we see it as a long haul or a long road. We see it as a step already taken, and I don't think we're seeing anything as a failure. I think each one of it is an opportunity. I don't think we'd be sitting here and having this dialogue if we had not taken that step. And I feel that the hundreds of messages which are so full of support for not just us, but for people who represent this entire community and India, I think that's beautiful to see. It's heartening to see, and this is what keeps us going. Truly, I mean, just to say that you've said it a few times, we don't feel brave. We don't feel like we have taken anything. And truly, I mean, we keep saying, yeah, why are people saying that we are very brave? Because this feels right. This feels fine. We have a lot of faith in our hearts right now. We have a lot of optimism. It doesn't feel like that this is anything wrong or...
Yes. Yeah, it's like the next natural step. I do want to ask you about, some of the cases that we've read about in the last couple of years, even after the reading down of 377. Anjana Harish's suicide, for example. Anjana was a young woman, a 21-year-old student who committed suicide because we understand, died of suicide, I beg your pardon. We understand that her parents put her in an institution where the doctors, used sedatives and used other sort of completely, worrying and perhaps violent treatments in what they thought was what they call conversion therapy to turn her heterosexual. And we have enough of people still talking about the fact that this is a treatable, condition. And because I have you here, when you read about cases like this and you're dealing with young people who are reaching out to you on a daily basis, does that take a toll on you as well, personally? Ankita, does it make you stop?
I think we do, as mental health professionals, I think we are privy to a lot of stories of pain and, struggle that young people go through. But I think rather than making us stop, Faye, I think every time that we hear a story like this, to be very honest with you, I think it's the urgency of why this journey needs to be taken. I think that conviction only gets stronger. I think that's all I can say. That's really, I think, been our experience. I think it actually works the other way. It makes us believe, and I think it reaffirms our belief in why this needs to be done and why this needs to be spoken about and why this dialogue is essential and why these steps are essential.
So I think I completely agree with Ankita, and I just feel that trauma and resilience are two things that occur hand in hand. They move together. When there is something which is so painful, from there comes a voice which says we have to do something about it because it is so painful. And I think it is painful to hear each one of these stories, the ones that did not come to an end that was, favorable. And again, we feel that because of that, if there are enough voices that say, this ought not to be done, this is not equality, this is not dignity, this has to be stopped. I think that's life, that we see both, and we get pained, but we get moved, we get tortured. Sometimes we feel, I don't know, it's a lot of mixed feelings. And I think that's become the key word for us nowadays, mixed feelings. So it's about holding both these paradoxes, I think. Yeah.
Again, in the Supreme Court judgment that read down 377, there was also a very important instruction to the government to write out laws that prevent or outlaw discrimination against the community in workspaces, in colleges, in schools, in building societies, for example, which we've realized are perhaps the most discriminatory spaces we have in our society. Unfortunately, we've not seen any trace of such a law or any trace of such rules. Do you have a lot of young people coming to you who face this side of discrimination, maybe not in their families, but we also exist in communities, in our places of work, in school, in colleges, where there's bullying, there's name calling, and that takes a toll as well?
Yes, absolutely. Would you like to? Okay. So, right from the start, it is about a child when they're growing up. Whatever it is that they're experiencing inside them is actually built by also the responses they're receiving around them. And as they start going out, especially around puberty, when this entire thing of either their own gender or their attraction, this starts becoming part of the narrative. It's also the time that this sense of self is developing and they want to belong. Prior to that, everybody is a friend, and then you become friends with these 4 people are my friends, but somebody else is not. I want to be part of this group, and that's part of their stages of development. If at that point of time they realize that they are different, I think that's where 2 kinds of sort of trauma starts. One is the trauma of invisibility. I have to hide a part of myself. And the other is the one of the aggression or the bullying, as people call it, the aggression from the other saying you're different and therefore you are wrong. It's both these, the withdrawal and not being able to express a part of themselves and not knowing why, but also suffering from the other side that I'm wrong, even in the part that I'm not being able to express fully. And the caution and the anxiety and what this child grows up with. So I'm not talking about myself. I think I was quite an unaware child. But I often, when I see children, and I feel that I'm probably these kind of spaces which need to exist in our larger social fabric about it's all natural and diverse. How does this impact? How does your gender or your sexual orientation impact who you are or who you wish to be? If that social narrative would include diversity. I think that's the part that we really feel would lead to a lot more of freedom, a lot less conflict, a lot more mental well-being in children and young adults. That if they knew the possibility existed, if they knew this was natural, then you would see the natural expression of it. And the conflict would decrease. If the conflict would decrease, it's like saying, if you're able to see many, many people like this, why would a bully even pick on this as something to be be aggressive about or bullied about? And that's the part, the hiddenness of it, the invisibility of a child and a young adult is, I think, not talked about often enough. It's the aggression, it's the trauma, it's the overt sort of, sometimes the sensationalization, sometimes it is the hypersexualized versions that people talk about, that, you know, this is only about sex and this child is not okay, this young adult is. It's also about the ones who are not talking about it, who are unable to express themselves at all. And they start showing something very different. The sense of withdrawal that comes from there impacts every relationship in their life later on. It impacts their sense of possibility. And I was joking to Ankita that, you know, till a certain point in my third decade even, I didn't know that everybody lived in 3-roomed houses. I used to think everybody had a 1-room house. Very happy I had a 1-room. I didn't know the possibility existed of being in love. Because I was so happy living in my 1-room, so to speak, metaphorical house, that this is how life is, this is what it is about. It's only when I found love that I realized, hey, people actually have these possibilities. And then you can't look back.
So I do want to ask you about this, and you did mention Enid Blyton, and I remember in the Famous Five, for example, in that series, there was a young girl whose name was Georgina, who preferred to be called George and wear her hair short and punch the boys, really. But there was a sort of acceptance of the tomboy.
Yes.
Girls who are tomboyish, and there would always be one in every group who was tomboyish. But do you hope that we will have more, you know, open role models, you know, in our children's books, in popular culture? You know, still Bollywood is being really crass. I mean, there are some beautiful filmmakers, but still it's part of jokes. You know, cross-dressing is part of a lot of comedy shows. Will that play a large part in more wholesome upbringing for not just members of the LGBTQI community, but everybody else also will grow up to be better human beings?
Absolutely. I think what you said is so right. It doesn't have to happen. You know, I think all of it somewhere has to happen simultaneously, right? Yes, it's important for the kids growing up curious about their sense of sexuality and gender to have multiple role models to experiment with, to be curious about, to ask questions about. But it is equally important for the other kids. So, I mean, we believe that, like, we feel so passionately about diversity being an embedded part of the curriculum from such a young age. And it has to be diversity across sexuality, across gender, across ability, all of it. Because I think the message that really needs to, I think, go to all kids, but also adults is we're all different and that's okay.
And that should be celebrated.
Yes.
I mean, what would we be if we weren't unique? I mean, on one hand, we want to be unique, and on the other hand, we're saying we need to conform and be like each other. So I think the inherent diversity is something that we need to celebrate, and not just tomboys, but I'd like the boys to be doing ballet. And and so many of them are such beautiful dancers. And I think this stereotype around exploration is something. Sorry, please.
Yes, so, you know, the tough part of this battle will be when religion comes into play, and it's going to come into play. As much as, you know, you might argue that the same sex, that the Special Marriage Act is not religious. There's going to be an argument of this is against our culture, this is against our tradition, our various religions do not allow this. What's your response to that?
I think our religion allows it. I think our religion is something that encompasses equality. I mean, I go back to the Vedas, I go back to the Mahabharata, I go back to all these texts. And I'm not necessarily talking about religion in just the religiosity of it or the ritualistic part of it. I do think that equality is not something that there is any religion that says is not part of. Dignity of human beings as humans is not something that the religion that we follow seems to oppose. So I'm sure there will be stuff around culture. I'm sure there is going to be a lot of flack around, maybe the marriage, same-sex, Hindu religion. But I think we are very hopeful that there are enough people out there who understand humanness in the way that we do. And do not see this as us trying to be in conflict with our religion, because this is not what we are intending to do. We are not in conflict with any religion, least of all.
The interesting part about this is in our country, all religions disagree on everything except this one point, when they will all come together to say that this is not okay with us. But we've reached the end of our time together. I want to thank you again for answering those questions and being so brave. And I wish you very, very good luck with your battle ahead. I do also recommend that you go back to the comments later, because there are so many of them and they're so beautiful. Priyanka has just written saying, thanks for doing this. Being a gay Indian man who's married to my husband in the US, raising our twins, we think the need to discuss same-sex relationship and love, there's a need to do it more often in Indian media, which is really beautiful. We have a series of messages from someone called Spandana, who says, as a non-binary pansexual person, I'm still working through the ramifications of this move and my stance on it. And Spandana, that's the whole point of having these conversations, is to create that spark so that everybody gets a chance to, privately think about it and decide how you feel. And so that's the whole point. So for all of our viewers who've joined in, the point of this conversation is to just spark thought. So you can think about it for yourself, in the privacy of your own mind at your own home, and decide how you feel about it. And I'm going to bring more and more couples onto this platform to talk about what it feels like, so that you can put faces to, to the issue and get to know the human beings behind it and make it more human. That's the whole point. Send in questions, send in recommendations. Kavita and Ankita, good luck, and thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.